Good afternoon. I'm Priya Vaseen Singh, Integration Manager with the City of Edmonton. I'm joined today by Sarah Feldman, the Director of Planning and Scheduling with the City of Edmonton and Edmonton Transit Service. Today we are talking about the new bus routes, including on-demand transit, launching April 25th. Welcome to the hot seat, Sarah, and welcome to all of you who are joining us today. It is April Fool's Day nonetheless. Cue all those memes. We're here for about an hour, and we're here because the shape of your transit system is important to you, and it's important to us. We will spend a bit of time reviewing why things are changing, ask Sarah some questions, and put your questions out to her. We already have a selection of them, but we want to hear from you over the next hour. Email us at busnetworkredesign@edmonton.ca. We will do your best to answer your questions live today, but if we can't, we will email you back a response. And don't forget, this live stream is being recorded, so you can watch it at any time on your own time. Sarah and her team have worked hard for the past 3 years on the bus network redesign. She has been there for engagement sessions that attracted tens of thousands of you to share your opinions and ideas on making a transit system that is more frequent, more direct, and better connected. And it's been her job to take all of that and put it together in a new look, better look transit system that starts on April 25th. Not an easy gig for sure, but a really, really important piece of work. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you, Priya, for having me, and thank you to all the listeners who are here and submitting their questions.
Sarah, let's get into it. Can we start with why? Why are things changing? Why on April 25th? And how big of a change will it be?
Yeah, this is a really big change. We're changing every bus route in the city, and we're introducing a new on-demand transit system. It's actually the largest pilot for on-demand in Canada and one of the largest in North America. So we know it's a big change, and we want to be here for our customers to help them make that transition to the new network. Why we're doing it, the last time we redesigned the bus network was in 1997, so over 20 years ago. And since then, we made some tweaks and minor adjustments, but we really haven't made big changes. And while we don't want to do a big overhaul every 20 years, we'll be doing that more frequently, smaller area changes. The current network we have, because it hasn't been changed in 20 years, just wasn't meeting the needs of today's city. It worked really well for a city 20 years ago, but doesn't meet our needs now or the city of the future. We have a brand new city plan that City Council approved last year, and we need to lay the framework for that city we're growing into. The current bus network's based on this idea of having a bus stop with service within 400 meters of every home. And that was a very difficult standard to maintain. And in many cases, what that meant was we would not have service in new neighborhoods because we didn't have the ability to grow. And areas that did have service would have very limited service. For example, they may only have peak hour service in the weekdays for the rush hours, and nothing in the evenings or weekends or middle of the day. And so our network needed to change. We needed to grow to become the city we need in the future, and the network that our customers are telling us that they want now through all the public engagement we did. One example actually that stands out to me from public engagement was the very first session we did at public engagement for the bus network redesign was at Clairview Rec Center in the Northeast. And one customer, a woman with children, came up to me and said she had seen the maps and saw that there were 2 routes before, and now there was only 1 route, and was really worried that we were cutting service from her area. She came and spoke with us, talked to our planners, and realized that 1 route now, before she only had peak service, and now she could travel on the weekends. And she was just so relieved and happy that she could now travel in other times of day. So, that's why we're doing this. Why are we doing this during COVID is something that comes up a lot. And as you may know, our ridership is lower right now than it was pre-COVID. And so it's actually a really good time to reintroduce, to introduce our current customers, the people who are currently riding, to this new network, and then gradually reintroduce all of our customers as they come back as we recover from the pandemic.
Interesting. So you mentioned a lot of things there. I mean, lots of changes, big changes, a growing city. The current network it doesn't work for a growing city. You mentioned COVID as well. And is this network designed for a post-COVID kind of post-pandemic world. You know, Sandy is asking us, why wasn't this just rescheduled to next year? Due to COVID, many people are still at home, so you won't get a clear understanding if it's working or not, and what will happen if there is low ridership. So can you kind of speak to that a little bit, Sarah?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's lots of pieces to that. I think we originally were planning actually to implement this new network last fall, and because of COVID, we proposed to City Council postponing it. It would have been very challenging to implement for last September. And Council gave us the direction to move forward and do that this spring. So we are doing it this April for that reason. As I mentioned, it's actually a good time because our ridership's lower and we can gradually introduce customers to the new network. But absolutely, the ridership we expect will be lower for a while as we gradually recover, and we can't too quickly react to the ridership we see on this new network because we expect it to grow over time over the next year or 2 years. One thing I think is really great about this new network is it does lay a foundation for what travel patterns might change because of the pandemic. More people might be working from home. More people might want to just travel in the off-peaks between neighborhoods and around the city rather than going downtown. And so we have a new foundation with crosstown routes and different types of routes to help people do those different travel patterns, whereas our current network was really focused on that commuter ride.
Thanks, Sarah. Sarah, you mentioned an experience that you had at Clairview, and it makes me think that I'm sure, you know, this new network redesign wasn't something that you and some planners dreamt up in your basement, but you engaged and you must have talked to people about what's important to them. How did you do that? And not only like what is important to them in a new redesign network, but is there still opportunity to provide feedback?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we did a lot of public feedback for designing this network. It actually started around 5 years ago when we were building our transit strategy. And through the transit strategy, we talked about a lot of things about how transit's important to Edmontonians and what they want from their transit service. But a really core piece of that was talking about the bus network. And through that, we actually did one of the largest public engagements the city's ever done. We had over 20,000 citizens gave us their feedback. And the last phase was around trade-offs. So we asked people questions like, would they rather have a shorter walk or more frequent service? And so questions around those trade-offs are really what informed this new network. And we needed that trade-off conversation because we are working within the same budget we have today, so no additional resources. And then when Council approved the transit strategy in 2017, we started the bus network redesign. And we did a big public engagement in 2018 on the redesign. And then in 2019, we did a lot of engagement around on-demand transit. And so we did 2 phases of engagement in 2018. We started with our first draft in the spring. And we went out all over the city. We did workshops and surveys and community conversations, focus groups. We also talked to our own ETS staff, such as our bus drivers. And we got all that feedback. And actually that feedback informed our changes in round 2, which was in the fall. We went back and we actually changed 20% of all of the network based on what we heard from the public, wherever it made sense in line with the principles of what we were trying to achieve. A good example of that is Castle Downs. We had redesigned all the routes around Castle Downs to go to Eau Claire and Northgate and not really go into Castle Downs Transit Centre as much. But in some of the workshops we did at the Castle Downs, I remember at Castle Downs YMCA, we were talking to a lot of people in that area, and they told us that it's actually more important of a hub than we realized. A lot of people wanted to connect there. And so we took that feedback, and for draft 2, we went and redesigned the routes around that area a lot. So yeah, public feedback's always been really important, and it will be going forward. You know, the bus network is a living thing. It does change over time, and we still continue to listen to our customers, and we'll be using that feedback we get to make changes in the future.
I'm happy you spoke to it. We're going to continue to see feedback, because I think the concern is sometimes that feedback from 2 years ago might be stale. It might not be valid for today and what's important to me today. And so if there is that opportunity, and I think that we continuously can make adjustments, that's important to know. So thanks for touching on that, Sarah. Sarah, I want to get your reaction to some of the comments that have been coming on social media where, let's be honest, they've been very honest. So are you ready?
Yes.
Sarah, comment 1 is, brutal service changes coming. 1 minute, ETS says they want to increase ridership. The next minute, they strip back services and increase wait times, remove shelters, increase walking time, lessen frequency, and overall increase trip duration times. Lots to unpack there, Sarah.
Yeah, there's lots in that one. I'll try to take each piece and talk about it a bit. The comment around the cutting service, right? We hear this a lot, that we're reducing service. And I think it's important to know that we did this redesign within our current budget. So the current operating budget we have and the current number of buses and transit operators. So we weren't able to grow, but we also didn't reduce. A lot of customers see that we have fewer routes, but that doesn't mean we have less service. We just have more service on all the routes that are left. There's more frequent service and there's more service in different times of day. The comment about shelters, as we change the service, of course, there's some bus stops that no longer have service that have shelters. And so we will be removing the shelters from those locations because they're really important amenities to transit riders, and we want to make sure they're out at the bus stops where people are riding. So we're going to remove them, and then we're going to start to replace them throughout the city over time as we see where the ridership is. We don't want to keep those shelters in a warehouse. We want them out there for our customers. So we're going to place them again at our priority stops. In terms of frequency and walking distance, as I mentioned, that was what the trade-off conversation was about with the transit strategy. We looked at, as we do with all of our projects, we look at what other cities are doing, other transit agencies across Canada and throughout North America. And we also look at the research. And what all that tells us is that what really brings people to ride transit is frequent service and more hours. And that a frequency-based network and a network that has more service hours on the routes is what draws people to transit. And so we redesigned the network around that, around a frequency-based network with more service hours. And we designed different types of routes to do that. So we have 5 new types of routes in this new network to help deliver that.
Sarah, you mentioned the 5 different types of routes. I hear frequency from you a couple of times. And I know there are different types of route types, like you mentioned, the 5 different types, frequent, crosstown, different route numbering systems. I think before we get into more questions, let's just watch a short video that further explains the different types of routes.
On April 25th, 2021, Edmonton's getting all new bus routes. And because we're all going to different places, we've got 5 different kinds of routes. First, there are frequent routes. These come at least every 15 minutes and generally follow main streets. They run down roads like White Ave, Jasper Ave, or 109th Street. They've got single-digit numbers, from 1 to 9. Nice simple routes, nice simple numbers. Then there are rapid routes. They take you from the suburbs to downtown and other locations like the University of Alberta or the nearest LRT stop. These have a limited number of stops, and their numbers end in X for express. There are crosstown routes. They drop you at suburban hubs without going through downtown. So if you're in Mill Woods and you need to be at West Edmonton Mall, you can catch one of these to get you there. They're routes 51 through 56. Next, we've got local routes. If you're not near a main street or transit center, these have you covered. The local routes give you a ride to the nearest LRT station, transit center, or transfer point, so you can get where you're going. These local routes have 3-digit numbers. Then there are community routes. They'll get you to those places that aren't quite walking distance, but aren't across town either. They connect seniors' residences and other community hubs with amenities like grocery stores or healthcare facilities. They also have 3-digit numbers. Last but not least, some places don't have the demand for a regular bus route. So, we're introducing new Edmonton On-Demand Transit, connecting those neighborhoods to the rest of the network at a nearby transit hub. To find out about these changes, visit edmonton.ca/newbusroutes. And please, follow all mandatory public health measures and help keep your community safe.
Wow, no doubt, lots of information to take in there. Different types of routes, different types of route numbers. I mean, lots to digest. If you didn't quite catch all of that, that video is available on our website at edmonton.ca/newbusroutes. Sarah, we have some very specific questions to trip plans. As we know, each rider is an individual. Each one experiences their trips a little bit differently. I'm going to ask you a couple of specific questions that we've received. With no service along 104th Avenue, west of 116th Street, it will now be a long walk to a medical appointment that currently has a stop almost in front of the building in the Brewery District. I know there will eventually be the LRT going down 104th Ave, but that's years away.
Yeah, it's a great question. We've heard lots of questions about this on social media. We also had a question from Leo. He was asking about the West Valley Line construction. And this person asking is bang on. It's all actually related to us preparing for building the LRT network. You know, the bus network always shifts and adapts due to construction, and we detour our routes. But for a major project like Valley Line West, what we decided was it was really important for us to not try to run parallel service along the same roads during construction. There's going to be a lot of construction activity and other cars trying to drive down those roads. And so that would be a challenging user experience. The buses wouldn't move very fast. And we'd also have to be often detouring any routes out of there to avoid construction. So it wouldn't be a great customer experience. So we don't have a route running along the path of the Valley Line. And then that section on 104th Avenue is a great example. So instead there we have more frequent service we've added on Jasper Avenue, on 107th Avenue, and 124th Street because we cannot run that parallel service. And that's true all along the Valley Line West on Stony Plain Road and then 156th Street. What we've done in that part of the West End around 156th Street is we've put a frequent bus route right down the middle on 95th Avenue rather than having a frequent bus route on 156th Street. And that will provide very frequent service to move from the West End to downtown, but still avoiding the Valley Line construction. Similarly, actually about Valley Line in the southeast, we are doing some things to prepare for Valley Line Southeast opening.
So Leo's asking then, in that particular situation, why is there no replacement bus available?
Yeah, it's exactly for that reason that if we had a replacement bus running the whole corridor where all those stops go, it'd be really challenging to do that because there's going to be so much construction activity and we'd have to be detouring around it and we wouldn't really be able to hit all those stops for Valley Line West.
Okay. Sarah, another question that I have is, so going from Westmount to West Edmonton Mall is now going to be 40 minutes instead of around 20, and no stops along 134th Street after Westmount. I have to walk all the way by to rescheduled. Why?
Yeah, so this is actually a great example of, in this case, there's a crosstown route. So I think what the customer's referring to is one of the local routes that travels. I think it's the 904, goes from West Edmonton Mall to Westmount, and it travels through neighborhoods. And because it goes through neighborhoods, it's a bit slower. It stops quite often and picks people up. But from major hubs, we have crosstown routes that go around the city without going through the core. And in this case, we have a crosstown route from West Edmonton Mall to Jasper Place, Westmount, and then up to Northgate. And for that particular trip from Westmount to West Edmonton Mall is about 20 minutes. So there's a much better, much more frequent, fast service to do that trip. I guess more generally, that's a good example of trip planning. If you use Google Maps or a transit app or the trip planner on our website, they'll often give you a few options of what trips you can choose, and they have different parameters. Some might be longer, have less walk, or some are more frequent. So really, encourage customers to try the trip planners and look at different options that are available to them.
So it's fair to say that I might not get an ideal trip on one planner, but if I continue kind of to explore different types of planners or different times, there's a local route that may take a little longer, or a crosstown route, like you mentioned, that could get me from A to Z quicker than the trip.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. Often the trip planners will give you a few of those options. You just kind of go down the list and explore them a bit.
Okay. Sarah, I have a question from concerned parents. We've been seeing kind of questions pop up around why we're making this change in the middle of a school year. Why couldn't we just wait until July? This is a big change, and being a parent myself, I could see that it'd be hard, and there are some challenges with this. And in particular, a parent is asking us, it would have been nice if you didn't cancel our neighborhood 13 bus, which is a main connection for kids who bus to school. Now the kids have to walk all the way to Castle Downs Road to catch a connection with no bus shelter to stand in. You should have left the 161 or the 13th going, or at least the 165 school special on peak hours through Carlsville and Carnarvon.
Yeah, great question. You know, I know it's a really tough timing in the middle of a school year and getting towards the end of the school year. I have young children as well, and I imagine how tough this is for parents to adjust their school trips. You know, we decided when we postponed, we were originally going to do this for the start of the school year in September, but due to COVID, we had to postpone, unfortunately. And when we decided to postpone, there were a few options, and the council support was to do this for April. We base our school travel, it changes often, right? Our school trips, they change every school year. Most school travel is on regular routes. We add service in the school year, and when the post-secondaries are in, we add lots of service to all of our regular routes, because that's where a lot of students travel. But there are some times where a regular route has just too many riders, too many students, and so then we may add a school special route. And those school specials, they change every year. We get data from the school boards about enrollment, and we look at our ridership and we make adjustments. So we'll definitely be looking at how the school routes do this spring and looking if we need to make adjustments for the fall.
And I think, you know, obviously lots of parents want to make sure that they're informed and they're prepared. Is there, where can they get information? Do the schools have information for them? Like, where is that information available?
Absolutely. We have shared a lot of information with the school boards, and I believe they're putting that out through their channels, whether it be School Zone or other ways the schools communicate to all of their students. And we also have all that information on our website. So you can go to our website, and there are maps of all the school routes. There's scheduled brochures for all of our regular routes, and you can use the trip planners to look at the school travel.
Thanks, Sarah. Sarah, there's obviously lots of questions and comments around people being concerned with challenges, if there's any mobility challenges around the redesign. And one question in particular that we got was someone being concerned that her grandma's in her 90s and we took away her bus route. For a person who is healthy and can easily walk 2 to 5 minutes to the bus stop, it could take someone like her grandma 8 to 10 minutes to walk with a walker, or 20 to 30 minutes to walk if she has to go further. I guess transit didn't think that one through, did they? Especially with people with mobility issues.
Yeah, this is tough, and I really feel for the customers. I know that this is hard, and it's particularly hard for people who have mobility challenges, seeing that the distance is going up and that it means a longer walk. As I mentioned, we've gone from 400 meters, which for an able-bodied person, that's about 5 minutes, up to 600 meters. So for an able-bodied person, that might be 7 or 8 minutes. But of course, for someone who's not as able-bodied, whether it's a senior or someone with other mobility challenges, that could be, you know, the 5-minute walk might be more like 10 minutes, and then the increase might be up to 15 minutes. So it can be a longer walk in many cases. But when we did the design, we really did pay a lot of attention to walking paths, to making sure that there were good walking paths to our bus stops and good walking environment. And we also, you know, while, as I mentioned before, about the frequency and the hours of service. So in many cases in neighborhoods, there's a bus stop close to grandma's house or whoever the customer may be, but it only has peak service. And for a lot of customers, that's not when they want to travel, particularly seniors who aren't, you know, necessarily commuting to downtown. They want to maybe go to the grocery store in the middle of the day, or go to a medical appointment, go see their grandkids on the weekend, whatever it might be. And so while it might be a farther walk, there's more options for them to travel and use transit more often. So that was the trade-off we made, using the budget we have today. In order to provide more service on the routes, we needed to increase those walks.
Okay, thanks.
I might also add that we have a set of community bus routes in the city. In the network, we have 8 of them. They serve larger seniors' residences, and they're particularly designed for seniors in those larger residences to have a stop right in front of the building that brings them to some destinations. And our on-demand service, we've actually added on-demand for 16 seniors' residences that used to have a community bus route and won't in the future. And now they'll have on-demand service 7 days a week, 9 to 4.
I'm happy you brought up the on-demand service, because that seems to be a popular topic as well. And in particular, we're getting questions about why is there no on-demand service in the north end? And why are we leaving out the north end with on-demand service? Leaving out districts completely with on-demand? And that seems to be a really popular question that we see.
Yeah, it's a great question. So our parameters for designing on-demand was around this idea of a first last kilometer challenge. Basically, the idea there is areas that have had service before within 600 meters or 400 meters and now have nothing. There are a number of neighborhoods in the city that their walk went much farther than that with the redesign. And the reason for that is because those neighborhoods, they had very low ridership on their regular routes, or they had very challenging kind of geographic reasons why it was hard to get a regular bus in there. And then in some neighborhoods never had service before. And so the on-demand service is a great addition. That was the one place where we increased our budget, where council agreed to, supported adding this new on-demand service as a layer of our transit network. In the north and in many areas of the city, the whole area is covered within 600 meters of a bus stop. And so it just didn't meet our parameters of areas that don't have service. Where the on-demand service is, it isn't in every area of the city. It's in those areas where we really didn't have any service at all.
So what is on-demand service? Like, how does it work? What is it in a nutshell?
Yeah, I'll try to give you the small nutshell of what it is. On-demand service are part of our regular transit network. It's a shuttle from neighborhoods to a designated transit hub. And so the way it would work is customers would book a trip. They would either do that by downloading the app on a smartphone or going to the website and booking the service there through the link on the website, or calling the call center. And through those three channels, they would go and book a trip. They can do that about an hour in advance of when they want to travel. And when they book a trip, they'll be told their pickup time from a bus stop. All the on-demand service uses regular ETS bus stops, and they all have signs on them. So customers would then walk out to that bus stop, and a shuttle bus will come along, pick them up. By shuttle bus, they look a lot like our DATS paratransit buses. They're just small mini buses. They're all brand new, beautiful. And then the service will pick them up. It might then pick up a few other people at stops in the neighborhood and then shuttle them to the hub. And at the hub, they would transfer to regular bus or LRT service. No fare is going to be collected on the on-demand. The fare will be collected when the customer transfers to the regular bus or LRT. So it's a model that's being done all across the world. We're not the first to do it. And it's a pilot for 2 years. We'll see how it works, and then that will inform recommendations back to City Council and discussion of what comes after that.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So not all comments are critical, and no, this is not an April Fool's joke. We did actually get some positive comments as well. So someone says, I am a senior. At first, I dreaded the up-and-coming new bus numbers and routes. But today, I decided to just start looking for a few of the routes. And I end up finding all the ones I use. Tips that help me: read and reread if necessary, download the applicable route maps and study them to make sure they go where you need to go. Eventually, I will get to the new bus schedules. I also treated this new system like I was a newcomer to the city, which helped, and tried not to compare the bus numbers we have now with the new numbers. This reminded me of the Fahrenheit to Celsius temperature changes way back long ago. Anyways, have a great day. I think that's a great reminder, right, of all the different types of the tools that are available, Sarah. Like there's probably lots that you can speak to.
Yeah, that's so great, and thank you to that customer for that positive feedback. I mean, on April 25th, we're all new transit customers learning a new network and treating it like we're travelers visiting the city, and learning the new network is a great kind of mindset to have. We're, of course, here for you. We want to provide all the tools and information to help customers make that transition. We have lots of information on the website. We have maps, we have route brochures with all of the routes as well as the schedules. All of the schedules are also in trip planners, Google Maps, Transit app, and our trip planner on the ETS website. And we have a lot of other information on our website. For example, we have some guidebooks that explain everything you want to know about on-demand transit, how it works, and one about the bus network. And we have some videos that are very helpful, and soon there will also be a how-to video for how to book your on-demand trip. So a whole host of info on the website, and customers can also, if they still have questions, to call 311, and those questions will get answered through that channel.
On that positive note, Sarah, I want to highlight some of the things that I've heard you speak to, and maybe you can speak a little bit more to it, but I heard, more off-peak. I heard weekend. I'm hearing, Crosstown. Is there certain features of the new network or principles that you really want to kind of draw attention to?
Yeah, there, in terms of examples of a few benefits, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. While we see some critical questions on social media, and we're paying a lot of attention to those, I think it's also important to mention some of the positive things we've heard from customers and things we know that are really great in the new bus network. So in some areas, we actually have new service. Now, of course, this wasn't about growing service to new areas, because as I mentioned, it's about using the budget we have today. So we weren't able to grow to all new neighborhoods. The on-demand services allowed us to do that in some areas. But in a few areas, actually, because they were close to areas that have service now, we were able to design a new bus route that serves those existing areas and also goes to a new area. A really great example of that is Crystalina Nera up in the north end. It has no bus service now, and the new bus network, it does have service to those bus stops. So that's really great, right? We were able to grow service in that area. The more service in the off-peaks and the weekends and evenings, we have that all over the city. Particularly in the outer areas of the city where they only had peak hour service. So I know a lot has been said about having a frequent bus network in the core that really works well to the center of the city, but there's a lot of benefits in the outer areas as well. Some examples, in the West End, there's Secord that's going to have now evening and weekend service. In the south, we have Granville and Chappelle and a few other neighborhoods in the south. In the north, we have Elsinore and Chambery, as well as some other neighborhoods in that area that they all now have off-peak service. And then in the southwest, there's a neighborhood called Laurel, for example. And the route that connects Laurel also goes to the Meadows Rec Center. Meadows Rec Center and Laurel, they only had peak hour service before, if you can believe it. And now there's off-peak service to that rec center and to that neighborhood. So all around the city, neighborhoods have more service on evenings and weekends. And then one other thing I'll mention, the different route types. There's the crosstown routes, and there's lots of improvements to crosstown routes around the city. 137th Avenue, for example, it didn't have service before on the weekends, and now the crosstown route does, so people want to travel on the weekends can do that. And we have a brand new crosstown route that goes from Clairview to Capilano to Mill Woods up 50th Street. And that's something we've heard for years, to have more service on 50th Street, and we do in the new network with the crosstown route.
Awesome, thanks, Sarah. Thanks for highlighting some of those. I think sometimes it's easy to get lost in the change. Change is hard for sure, and sometimes I feel like bus routes are very personal, right? It's like my bus route, this is one I take every day, and when something gets taken away from you, it could feel very personal, and I think it's important to bring it back to the principles of the new network and kind of the fundamental reason all these changes were made, and I recognize it'll be very hard, huge. It's a change of habit for many people, but I appreciate you taking some time to kind of identify some of those changes that we're making to the new network. So Sarah, I want to get into some questions. I see that we are getting live questions. It looks like Chantal has a question. In a winter city, how was the decision reached to make a walk to the bus 15 minutes when they used to be right outside the door? And then there's a two-part to that question. My second question is, why is there no longer a bus that goes straight to Kingsway Mall from Eau Claire during non-peak hours? Many elderly riders take this bus for medical appointments in the mall, like my mother, and now I need to find an alternative for her.
Great, yeah, maybe I'll do those two parts. So the first part around the walking, as I mentioned, we increased the walk from up to 600 meters, which we think for an able-bodied persons more 7-8 minutes. But certainly for some that maybe could be up to 15 minutes if they're not as able-bodied. And that was around the trade-off that was made, looking at what other cities are doing, not just warm weather cities, other winter cities, redesigning their bus networks for this frequency-based service. And we also wanted to make a more direct service, right? So that people, when they get on the bus, they're getting where they need to go faster. So they might walk a bit farther, but then once they're on board, they're not winding through neighborhoods forever before they get to where they want to go. So that should make a similar, or in some cases better, travel time for most people. In the case of the route from the north to Kingsway Mall, of course, all the routes have changed, so sometimes they don't connect the same neighborhoods to the same destinations. But we do still have a lot of routes designed around these major destinations like the universities and post-secondary institutions and all the hospitals. There is still a lot of service coming from the north down to Kingsway and Nate, and then to the Metro line and downtown. We have several express routes that operate that way. Some go from Eau Claire Northgate to Nate and Kingsway, and some go directly downtown. Some are peak only, and some operate all day. So, if there are specific connections that people want to know more about, we want to look at that feedback. If there's a travel pattern that's really important that's missed, that's the type of thing we'll look at going forward and see if we can adjust.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So Sarah, John's asking us, what's going to happen to the bus stops within Edmonton for St. Albert Transit after April 25th? And when will construction start on the LRT at West Edmonton Mall?
Great, okay, again, two parts. So I'll start with the first. So in terms of St. Albert Transit, as well as Strathcona County Transit, Leduc Transit, the Beaumont Transit Service, Spruce Grove, it's Fort Saskatchewan, none of those are changing. Those are all operated by the regional municipalities. Some we operate on their behalf, and others, like St. Albert, they operate their own service. And those bus stops aren't changing. We maintain the bus stop signs for them, but their routes aren't changing. That's up to them if they, in the future, ever want to make adjustments. In terms of West Edmonton Mall, construction is going to get underway right away here this spring. And specifically around West Edmonton Mall Transit Center, we're planning to move to a temporary transit center north of the mall that will be being constructed this spring and summer. And our plan is to move in for the start of the school year, in start of September. Thanks,
Sarah. And in your response there, I heard you mention bus stop signs, and that actually made me think about bus stop signs around the city right now are changing. Even right outside my door, I see some have red on them, some have yellow on them. Can you just break that down a little bit quickly for people who are listening today in terms of what they should and should not be looking for right now?
Yeah, absolutely. We have over 7,000 bus stops in the city, if you can believe it. It's a lot of bus stops. So we had to start really early. Changing was the first thing we had to go out on the ground and do for the redesign. We started early last fall. And we have different types of signs that have gone up to show different changes. So if you see red and white stickers, that means that bus stop has routes right now, and it will still have routes in the new network, but those are changing. So on the top, it will say, here are the routes operating through April 24th, and below it's the new route numbers that start on April 25th. We also have bus stops that are brand new. Some stops, never had service before, like I mentioned, Crystalina Nera and some other neighborhoods. So those have a brand new sign with a little yellow, it's a sticker that says starting April 25th. And then we do have stops around the city that are closing, and the crews went around and put stickers on those showing that those stops are closing after April 24th. Some of those signs, they'll say this stop is closing and on-demand service is coming here. And now all those on-demand stops also have a brand new stop that shows the on-demand service. It's a yellow and blue sign. So and information on how to interpret those signs also available on the website. We're really happy our brand new bus stop signs are more readable, more visually accessible for people. They're a great improvement over the design we had with the old signs.
Thanks for breaking that down, Sarah. I admit I panicked the first time I walked out and saw red, but then when I got closer, I realized it just meant that certain bus routes were not closed, were not going there anymore, and there were different ones coming. So I appreciate you clarifying that. So Grace asked us, Sarah, I'm currently working on a group project for university, and we are discussing how having online schooling as an option is beneficial, and these route changes just help to strengthen our argument. Would be interesting in the Q&A if you touched on how and if these changes will be affecting students at all the major post-secondaries, any school really. And I feel like there are some big gaps with these changes, but I look forward to you explaining that in more detail.
Yeah, great question. We add a lot of service for the school year, at the beginning of the post-secondary year, and then at the beginning of the school year for junior and senior high students. And we continue to do that in the new bus network. So we decrease service in the summer, and then we add a lot because we know a lot of students are traveling. We made sure when we designed the network that all the post-secondaries are really well connected. And in many cases that improved. So for example, King's College on 50th Street didn't have great bus service before, and now with that new Crosstown route, it has great service to get to that location. Some of our post-secondaries are just really well situated with the LRT and with very frequent bus routes. So we have a lot of service still going to post-secondaries. In terms of schools, we also put in a lot of service every school year for junior or senior high school students, and we've continued to do that. We didn't reduce it because of the pandemic. We're putting in as much as we would in any normal school year. So there's still a lot of service out there for students.
Excellent. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for mentioning that. So we have some more questions coming in. I'm just going to get them on the screen here. Sandy is asking, we asked that one actually during the conversation we already had about COVID and the impacts it would have. Amanda is asking, and this is a two-parter here, Sarah, what is being done to accommodate the lack of on-demand service that is being reported? Current map shows that no on-demand service east of St. Albert Trail and north of Yellowhead Trail. And then the second part of that is, why is there no bus service running north to south on 82nd Street between 137 and 180th Ave?
Great. So the first part about on-demand. So when we designed the on-demand, we had certain parameters around it through our discussions with City Council. And the parameter was around providing service where there was no service in the future, where we were removing service entirely and the bus, those neighborhoods were beyond 600 meters of service. Those neighborhoods tend to be, for example, neighborhoods that are tucked into a ravine or really on the outskirts of the city where ridership has been very low in the past, and we just don't have enough ridership to support a big bus. Because it's a bit geographic and case specific, there's some areas of the city that don't have those circumstances. They're actually very well served in the new network. They have no areas that are beyond 600 meters, or the areas that are beyond are very, very small. So there weren't any areas in the north side of the city, and in some other parts of the city, there weren't areas that met those criteria for on-demand because they have a lot of local routes, crosstown routes, LRT, et cetera. And that was the case in the north end. There's just no areas identified for on-demand. In regards to 82nd Street, we currently don't have a bus route that goes up and down the entire north part of 82nd Street. We do have routes that do portions of it, and they travel either to the LRT, the Capital Line, or to Northgate and Eau Claire to bring customers sort of east-west and do portions of 82nd Street. In the new network, we do still have routes that travel through those neighborhoods and bring people to Eau Claire and Northgate, as well as the Capital Line. And we compare the travel times from those neighborhoods and to get to downtown, for example. And it's comparable in the new network to what it was in the current network. So it's the same or faster to travel from those areas over to 97th Street, for example. And 97th Street has a lot of service on it. It has many express routes, some local routes, frequent bus routes, and there's infrastructure there to support it. There's 2 transit centers where people can make good transfers. So we really want to focus service there and bring people from the neighborhoods to that great service, as well as east to the LRT.
Sarah, before when you spoke about on-demand transit, I heard you say it was a pilot. What does that mean? Does that mean, like, say, maybe 4 or 5 months down the line that we could adjust it, add in more neighborhoods if we see that there is a need for it? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, it's a pilot. We were given funding to do it for 2 years and committed to coming back to council and reporting frequently how it's going. It is definitely a more flexible service model to grow or to adjust over time. We're going to be keeping a close eye on the data, and we don't want to respond too fast. We need to give time for this new service to take off, for people to learn about it and start using it. But it is certainly a model that we can adjust based on feedback, and we can also grow it and change it and add it to other areas in the future.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Sarah, so Crystal is asking, she says she lives in Maple Oak Ridge area and asks, why are there no routes to the Bonnie Doon area? Basically meaning there are no ways for our children to get to school. Our seniors still need access to their activity centers, and many of us still need to get to work.
Okay, I'm not familiar with the specifics of this one, so we might take this one back and look into it and get back to the customer directly and share that information. I think in this case the area brings service to the LRT, to the Valley Line. Of course, in the southeast, we've designed all the network in preparation for the Valley Line to bring customers from the neighborhoods to the closest station, because that's the fastest trip. So I think in the Maple area, we bring people to the new Valley Line stations, and then they transfer to get to Bonnie Doon. But I'll have to get my team to look into that and get back to her.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. So we
Yep.
will make sure we get back to you with that particular answer. So Brian's asking, why is the redesign focused on bus frequency rather than usability? So meaning lots more walking. Looks like a 3 or 4-parter here, Sarah. Are timing points going to be synchronized better? And why have routes with A and B variations instead of similar but different numbers? You know, an 80A and 80B rather than 80 and 81.
Great. Okay, I'll take one at a time. So with the first part about why was it designed around frequency instead of, he phrased it as usability. As I mentioned before, the whole redesign was based on using the same budget we have today. There's no growth, there's also no reduction. And so in order to do that, there were trade-offs. And one of those trade-offs was frequency versus walking distance. And so we intentionally have the walking distances farther so we could have more service on the rest of the routes. And that was the principle behind this, discussed with City Council and through the transit strategy. And that's how we've approached all the design. And as I mentioned, that's what we're hearing from other cities across Canada and in the world that are redesigning around a frequency-based system. We still hope it's very usable, and I think it actually will provide, we're very confident it's a great new network for Edmontonians, and they'll find it has great service. The second part was around A's and B's, or timing points. Our current network is based on transfers at the transit centers. We have over 30 transit centers in the city, and routes come in and go out, and they're designed around a pulse where they all are timed to come at the same time and make transfers. Because we have a frequency-based network, there's frequent service going in and out of the transit centers all the time. So we're no longer trying to have all the buses pulse in and pulse out within a few minutes of each other. That was a great model 20 years ago and for a growing city, but we've sort of outgrown that model. We're too big of a city to maintain that, and it leads to a lot of challenges for customers and for operations. So our new network is designed around transferring with the frequency of the service. And then A's and B's. It's a great question. We have 4 routes, it's not very many, 4 routes that have branches, A's and B's. And we, for example, the route 1A and 1B in the Capilano Gold Bar area. It splits after it crosses the river eastbound and does A for the north and B for the south. And we did that because because of some of the public feedback we got with the first draft, and we wanted to resolve some issues there to make sure we had service in both neighborhoods. But this is a great example of feedback, right? The numbering, maybe it's confusing and something we've already talked about. In the future, we might renumber them to not show the A's and B's and give them unique numbers. And it's a great piece of feedback, and appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, no doubt it could potentially get confusing, like you said, but it's a good opportunity to get that feedback. Brian wasn't done yet, Sarah. He's asking, will fare prices increase? And will transfer time durations, the 90 minutes, increase due to the extra walking required?
Okay. Yeah, so fare prices, as part of the bus network redesign, we're not changing any of the fares. City Council did approve, as part of the budget adjustment last fall, an increase to the cash fare this year. And that's as a result of some of the budget pressures that the city has. But it's unrelated to the bus network redesign. It's about a broader conversation around the budget. But it's not directly resulting from this project. And then what was the other piece?
And the 90 minutes, the transfer time.
Oh, transfer time. Yeah, so our policy is around transfer time, going from using a paper transfer from one service to another is 90 minutes, and that policy won't change. Transfers will still be very frequent. As I mentioned, we have a frequency-based system, so customers should be able to still make that transfer well within that time.
Thank you, Sarah. So Elizabeth's asking, my only route close to my house is being removed, and now I have to walk 4 blocks to the nearest bus route. This bus route is also usually extremely packed during peak hours of the day when I would need to take it. How can this redesign help me get downtown fast now that I have to walk farther and most likely not fit on the bus during the morning route?
Great question. Yeah, I think customers see that they have to walk farther and that they're walking to some of those roads where the buses were really full before. But as I mentioned, we've reallocated service. We put more service on those busy roads. And so we want to make sure that, while there might have been fuller buses before, we want to address that by adding more frequency and more express routes. So I think customers will find that they're walking farther, but the buses should have more space on them. Certainly now, immediately in COVID, there's lots of space on the buses because ridership is lower, and as it comes back, that frequency will address a lot of that. But something we'll monitor, as we always do, the ridership, and a big priority for us going forward where we put, as we grow service, is to continually put more service in those busy corridors, to continually reinvest in the routes we have so that they have enough service and they're not overcrowded.
Looks like Christian has a question that we may have already answered, but it's about this being done in the middle of the school year and the disruption that this causes. Could this not have waited until July, really?
Yeah, as I think we talked about a bit before, it is challenging in the middle of the school year. I know it's very hard for students, parents. It is unfortunate that we needed to postpone, but now is the time that we are going to go forward with. It can be good, actually. Now we get students to adjust to new routes, and we'll get feedback right away how those routes are performing, and feedback from parents, and that can actually inform what we do for September. So really encourage everyone to inform themselves of what the new school travel will be for the last few months of the school year, and then if things aren't working, we'll try to fix them for next school year.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So it looks like Henry has a question. Both my wife and I rely heavily on public transit to get around. We are seeking to move our residents in the near future, and it is imperative that we know our public transit options with respect to whatever neighborhood we move into. Having access to a hard copy of the entire revised ETS system map would be extremely helpful in this regard. Where can I acquire one?
Great question. Yes, we do have full system maps, the traditional big paper fold-out maps of the full city, as well as zooming in on the downtown and showing our late night service. Those are just now came in from the printer, being distributed to our third-party distributors around the city, places like libraries and other community facilities like rec facilities. So more information on where to find those will be coming available on our website soon. Of course, we'll be adjusting as different facilities open due to COVID. So we need to distribute them to facilities that are able to put out paper products at this time.
Is it safe to say that they will be out before April 25th, before the big changes happen?
Yes, absolutely. They'll be out, and if customers want to find out more where to find them, they can look at our website or call 311 and we'll let them know.
Awesome, thanks, Sarah. It looks like we have just one comment left here. Why can't you wait until the Valley Line is open and the construction on Capitol Line is finished to launch the new routes?
Yeah, that's the construction at Stadium Station. Yeah, so great question. So we redesigned the southeast around the Valley Line, assuming the Valley Line will be opening soon. And in the interim, I know a lot of customers know there's lots of routes that go from the southeast to downtown, routes like the 8 and the 15. So we looked at all the ridership of all those routes and how many people travel. There's a reason we're building an LRT. There's a lot of people who go from the southeast to downtown. And so to replace those routes until the Valley Line opens, we have a bus route. It's called the 510X, and it will travel at or very near to all of the Valley Line stations to provide a very express service. And it's the most frequent route we have in the city. It's going to be every 3 or 4 minutes. Most of our big buses, the big articulated buses with the kind of accordion in the middle, they'll be all on that 510X. So we have a lot of capacity there. And when the Valley Line opens, we'll remove that route, and then the LRT will be there. It's very difficult, to time the bus network with the opening of the Valley Line, and so this is a piece to bridge that, and knowing that the Valley Line will be opening soon. And then in terms of Stadium Station, we are renewing Stadium Station to improve the customer experience and provide a better station for the city and for that community. That work's underway, and will be completed later this year. It does have some changes to the LRT frequency, reducing the frequency for the spring and summer on the Capitol Line. But that actually is a good time right now to be doing Stadium Station because of COVID. The ridership's a bit lower, and so we can accommodate that lower ridership. So it doesn't really, I think, pose a problem for the bus network because we have enough capacity on the LRT to support during that stadium construction.
Interesting, thank you. It was funny as you were mentioning the 510X comes every 3 to 4 minutes. So in the time you started talking, to the time right now, they've already would have came once, and possibly by the time we're done, 2 times. So that just shows you how quickly that frequency of that service is.
Yeah.
You know what? Thank you, Sarah. I recognize it's not easy to be in the hot seat for sure. Change is never easy either. This is a massive, huge change for the city, for bus routes, a new network. I appreciate you being here today. I'm going to give you the next 30 seconds to a minute to drive this home, Sarah.
Thanks, Priya. You know, we're really confident that this is the right new network for Edmonton, the Edmonton we are today and the Edmonton will be in the future. And we know it's a big change, and we're here for you, for our customers, to help you make this transition. We want to provide information to help make this transition easier for you, and really appreciate all the customers and everyone who listened today and shared their questions. If we didn't get into any questions, we'll be connecting to provide responses back. And just thanks to everyone for their attention, and looking forward to helping you all transition to the new bus network on April 25th.
Thanks, Sarah. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. You know, there's lots of information here, but there is lots of information available on our website as well, edmonton.ca/newbusroutes. I encourage you to go there and find all the information you need. Check out the videos we have. And as Sarah mentioned, play around with the trip planners. Get used to April 25th and get used to the new routes that are coming. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and thank you once again, Sarah.
Thanks, Priya.